Welcome to Murder Mile UK True Crime. This isn't a video, it's an audio experience. The only images you'll need for this episode are these. So close your eyes, open your mind, and savour the sounds of Murder Mile. Welcome to Murder Mile Unleashed. And I'm away! Goodbye London, hello Britain. And as I cruise the UK's canal network in my little boat, I shall bring you true crime cases from the cities, towns and villages I visit. This week, I'm in Bentley, Warwickshire, to explore how solid the conviction of Tommy Walker's killers really was. My name is Michael, I'm your tour guide, and this is Murder Mile. Episode 360, Who Rolled Tommy Walker? This killing began like any other. It had a victim, Tommy Walker, a suspect, Martin O'Halloran, a motive, robbery, and it ended after an investigation with 2 arrests, a trial and 2 convictions. It barely made the national press, yet it was called a miscarriage of justice, full of lies and corruption. In the eyes of the law, the murder was solved. The evidence was overwhelming. The culprits confessed. It was corroborated by witnesses, and Martin O'Halloran and Arthur Langford were convicted and imprisoned. So why does a question mark hang over the killing of Tommy Walker? Tommy hated his Christian name of William, so William Thomas Walker was known by everyone in his circle as Tommy. He also said that he was 54 years old, but being a little vain, Tommy wasn't born in 1921 as he claimed, but 1918, making him 57. But then again, who doesn't shave off a few years as they age? Tommy was born and raised in the former mining village of Polesworth in North Warwickshire, living with his father Christopher, who was a bricklayer, and his housewife mother Sarah. At 14, the common, with his older brother Albert and sister Dorothy, and they were all educated at the Polesworth school. A very ordinary upbringing. Generations of Walkers had lived and died in Polesworth, so everyone knew Tommy. Or at least they thought they did, as although he was never married or had a girlfriend, with homosexuality only being partially decriminalised in 1967, few villagers knew that he was gay, as many thought he was just eccentric and camp, like other secretly gay or bisexual men of that era, like Larry Grayson, Rock Hudson or Freddie Mercury. Age 14, in the early 1930s, Tommy found his calling under the training of a local hairdresser, and after a decade learning his craft, he had opened his own hair salon on the Tamworth Road, which he ran for almost 30 years, becoming one of the top ladies' hairstylists in the district. Many of his clients were wealthy, but his salon never expanded, being staffed by just 2 assistants and occasionally his sister. As a man of sophistication and class, he was always stylishly dressed. He loved the finer things in life, like fine wine, good food and high art. He was said to be pleasant and well-mannered, if occasionally a little bit sassy, but he was never embroiled in any fights or arguments, as he always chose to live the easier life. For several years, he lived in a small but tasteful flat at 23 Abbey Green Court in Polesworth, with his friend Tony Haynes, a bus driver with Midland Red in Tamworth, having met 16 years before. Tony said, "He was the kindest man you could ever wish to meet. If he saw anyone alone in a pub, he would always buy them a drink. He was always smiling. But he wasn't a big drinker or a party animal." Described as a perfect gentleman, Tommy had no enemies, his business didn't make a fortune, he had no secrets except the obvious. And 2 months prior, he'd holidayed with Tony in Morocco, but he didn't live an extravagant life. People said he was wealthy, but he wasn't, as he didn't own his own flat, His car was a nearly new Mark II Ford Capri in Roman bronze. And in his will, he left just £3,400, roughly £37,500 today. Tommy Walker was murdered, as proven in a court of law. But how safe was this conviction? Thursday the 5th of June 1975 was his last day alive. And also, although an important day for Britain, as a referendum had been called to see if we were to remain as a member of the European community, it was a typically ordinary day for Tommy Walker. He awoke, had breakfast, dressed in a white vest, blue blazer, a blue and red tie, a pair of hush puppies, and as a rare snowstorm had hit the Midlands just a few days before, being a cool 12 to 14 degrees, he wore a distinctive suede jacket with green flecked lining. Thursdays were the Salon's half day, so he closed at 1 p.m. At 2 p.m, he went to the polling station to cast his vote. Tony saw him chatting to two ladies and recalled, he said, "Cheerio, I'm going to Atherstone to tax my car, and then I'm going along Watling Street to Birmingham." All of which he did, and having filled up with fuel, at 4 p.m. he collected his stock at the wholesalers, leaving it in the boot of his Ford Capri. He also bought a bottle of Bordeaux at Rackham's, and at 5:20 p.m. parked up at the back of New Street Station. Far from the prying eyes and gossiping tongues of his village, this was where his secret life began. But he wasn't nervous or afraid, as he did this most Thursdays and Fridays. Edwin Jarrett, QC for the prosecution, unfairly stated in court,
"It was Mr. Walker's practice to spend the evening prowling the public houses and lavatories to pick up a homosexual partner and take him back to Polesworth. He liked the manly and unkempt, younger men who looked down and out."
This is why robbery was said to be the motive.
As amongst the gay set, his nickname was Moneybags and the Millionaire. He was often seen with rolls of notes in his hand.
And being an easy mark, not just for queer bashers who violently attacked gay men, but also petty thieves who masqueraded as homosexuals. Several times he'd been assaulted, with his car stolen and his flat burgled. The pubs and clubs he visited were described as dangerous, depressing, and grubby little hellholes. And although he stood out amongst the unwashed drunks, here he was known, he was liked, and he was a regular. At 7:30 p.m, he was seen outside of the Toreador pub on Edgbaston Street, a dive for deadbeats, with an unidentified man, possibly Martin O'Halloran or Arthur Langford, but this is uncertain. At 8 p.m, he phoned Tony at his flat.
He said that he'd met a friend,
someone nicknamed either Irish or Irish Think, but the line was crackly.
But his words to me were, "I shan't be late."
At roughly 9:45 p.m, a short walk from the Bullring, he was seen by a friend, alone and outside of the Crown on the corner of Station Street and Hill Street. They talked, and Tommy seemed his usual self. And then a little after 10:10, he was seen near a set of notorious toilets at New Street Station between platforms 7 and 12, as used by gay men for cottaging. Although the police found few witnesses to confirm this, as that would require them confessing to an illegal activity with Tommy just hours before he was murdered. But is this where Tommy met his killer? In a pub in Birmingham's gay district? In a public toilet for sex? Did they meet somewhere else as planned? And did Tommy plan to bring him back to his flat in Polesworth? Tony confirmed that Tommy often brought men back.
Rough types.
So he had no reason to hide it. And sometime after 10:40 p.m, Tommy drove his car 19 miles northeast in the direction of his village. And yet he never made it home. Sometime between 11:10 and 11:30 p.m, 5.5 miles short of Polesworth, Tommy's Ford Capri pulled into the entrance of a dark and secluded bridleway off the B4116 Coleshill Road in the tiny rural parish of Bentley. Opposite, the horse and jockey pub was closing, and at 11:40 p.m, the licensee Mary Taylor waved goodbye to her staff for the night and saw Tommy's car parked up, dark and empty. No one suspected that anything bad had happened. But 100 yards away, Tommy was dying in pain. Around dawn, Alfred Stringer, a miner heading to the nearby Baddesley Colliery, walked down this bridleway, found a black pen and pocketed it, thinking nothing more of it. Passing again around noon with his fellow miner Sam Keeling, he stated,
"In the spot where I found the pen, the grass at the side of the path was lying flat. Being nosy, I saw a man in the ditch. He was lying face up with blood covering his face. It stunned me. He was partially covered in bracken."
He then ran to the horse and jockey pub, and Mary Taylor called the police. The investigation was headed up by Detective Superintendent Harry Atkins of Warwickshire CID. Timing-wise, a couple had left the bridleway just after 11 p.m. and didn't see Tommy's Capri. Mrs. Mercer of nearby Meadow Cottage heard raised voices at around 11:15 p.m, which she described as cries of pain. Then it all went quiet. And Mary Taylor saw the Capri parked up and empty, but heard nothing at 11:40 p.m, which matches the fact that the pathologist Derek Barrowcliff established that death had occurred just before midnight. The crime scene was simple. Tyre marks for a Ford Capri lay at the bridleway's entrance. A flattened patch of grass suggested that a struggle had taken place. His pockets were empty. Drag marks led to a ditch. The body was dumped and covered in bracken. The car was stolen, and the culprits had vanished. Newspapers reported,
Police believe that a robbery was the prime motive for the killing.
which made sense, as everything of value or that could identify him was missing. 2 checkbooks, his credit cards, his wallet, his wristwatch, his keys, as well as his umbrella, his trilby hat, his suede coat and his car. Police used tracker dogs to search the surrounding areas, but none of these items could be found. For the police, this seemed to be an obvious timeline. Tommy went to Birmingham. He met an unnamed man or men at 8 p.m, as confirmed in a phone call to Tony. Tommy and both men had planned to drive back to Tommy's flat, but instead stopped off at this Lover's Lane in Bentley. All 3, Tommy, and it is said Martin O'Halloran and Albert Langford, even though they both denied this, walked 250 feet into the isolated darkness of this bridleway, and either on the pretext of sex or masquerading as gay men, mistakenly believing that Tommy was wealthy. They beat him and robbed him, but took it too far. Reports state,
Tommy was about to engage in sexual activity.
although it's unclear how this was determined, whether his flies were undone or his penis was out. But he had partially undressed, as he'd left his suede coat in the car, his tie was undone, his blazer was open, and his white vest was bloodstained. Prior to or during sex, in a surprise attack, one of the men, said to be Langford, grabbed Tommy from behind, pulled his blazer over his head and trapped his arms so he couldn't fight back. The other culprit, maybe O'Halloran, described as
Brutal, merciless, experienced in violence.
viciously beat Tommy about the head, kicking him as he lay helpless on the floor. With pathologist Derek Barrowcliff stating,
His skull was fractured. He died in considerable agony and pain.
as hemorrhaging internally. It took at least an hour for Tommy to die, as he lay paralysed and barely conscious in this cold ditch. So did this begin as a robbery by 2 down-and-outs masquerading as gay men, and mistakenly end in a murder? Tommy Walker had no enemies or rivals, only friends. So that side of the investigation hit a dead end. His credit cards and checkbooks were unused after his death, and his jewellery hadn't been pawned. His car, a bronze Mark II Ford Capri, was one of 38,000 sold that year, so it wasn't exactly unique. But on the first day of the hunt, the West Midlands police helicopter was called in to search for the car. 8 hours later, 105 miles northwest of Bentley, in the village of Rainford in St Helens, Merseyside, a farmer found the Ford Capri abandoned in a field. Its registration plate, TKV 195G, was missing, as well as Tommy's driving licence, insurance certificate, MOT, registration book. And being forensically aware, it had been wiped clean of any fingerprints, with the carpet ripped out and the console's ashtray missing. 5 days later, the licence plates were found not too far away, having been wiped clean and smashed. So were his killers from Merseyside? The police thought not, as believing this was probably a smokescreen to throw them off the trail. They kept their focus local, thinking that Tommy's attackers had initially a plan to roll him and raid his flat. But realising that he may be dead, they dumped the car and fled. 4 weeks into the manhunt, the investigation's headquarters moved from the nearby village of Atherstone to Steelhouse Lane in Birmingham city centre, stating,
"We are certain that the twilight world in which Tommy lived could give us the answers that we want."
believing his sexuality was also a motive to his killing. But this side of the investigation was flawed from the outset, as relations with the gay community was hostile, and their detective skills was peppered with ignorance and prejudice. Treating every gay man as a suspect rather than a potential witness, uniformed constables swarmed the gay district, and laughably, undercover officers dressed in floral shirts and tight trousers in an attempt to blend in. Many gay pubs were raided, regulars were rounded up, and the police seemed shocked that they were unwilling to talk. And why would they? As back then, being one of the most corrupt police forces in the country, who at that very moment were fabricating evidence and forcing confessions, leading to the wrongful convictions of the Birmingham Six, which in 1989 led to the disbanding of the West Midlands Serious Crime Squad. The gay community went silent over the killing of one of their own, for fear of being fitted up for a murder. Details were sparse and sketchy at best, and said to be corrupt to the core. A month later, the police announced,
"We have traced a witness to the murder who is being given full police protection."
Yet in hindsight, it's likely that this was either a lie, as they claimed,
"We have a photo fit of the killer, but have decided not to release it,"
which is an odd move in a nationwide manhunt, or that this witness was actually Mrs. Mercer of Meadow Cottage, who admitted she had heard
cries of pain,
but saw nothing. One month in, and the police didn't have a name or a description of his killers. All they had to go on was a remark made by Tommy to Tony over a crackly phone line, in which he said that at around 8 p.m. he'd met a man nicknamed either Irish, Irish Think, or Irish Something, suggesting he couldn't recall the rest of the nickname. And yet still reports stated,
exhaustive inquiries pointed in the direction of Arthur Langford,
a 35-year-old Scottish-born native of Birmingham, twice divorced, who was nicknamed Peg-Leg Jock, owing to his artificial limb. With fair hair, sideburns and a handlebar moustache, his criminal record was so long he was on first-name terms with the police. He was seen drinking with Tommy in Birmingham that night. He was broke and of no fixed abode, and admitted of Tommy,
"Yeah, I know the bloke. He was a hairdresser. I'd known him for a long time and he used to give me money. I knew where he lived and I liked his apartment."
Arrested in the pub in Vauxhall on the 15th of July 1975, Langford was charged at Atherstone Magistrates Court. He pleaded not guilty to murder and said that he was in the company of his friend, Martin O'Halloran. 2 days later, O'Halloran was arrested at his sister's home at Honeysuckle Gardens in Hatfield, where he is said to have stated to the police,
"I've been expecting you."
Martin Anthony O'Halloran was a 26-year-old Irish drifter from Kildare, who was known as Gypsy Dave and Kojak. He had brown hair and arched eyebrows, and having a low IQ, it was said that he couldn't read or write and had a poor memory. In his first statement, Langford said that on Thursday the 5th of June 1975, the day of the murder, himself, O'Halloran, and a friend, Alan Smith, hitchhiked from Birmingham to London, met O'Halloran's girlfriend, Patricia Reardon. Alan left them. They slept rough in Charing Cross, and then headed to O'Halloran's sister's house in Hatfield, where they stayed for a few weeks. At no point did they return to Birmingham. Read Langford's statement. O'Halloran agreed with this version, but detectives weren't having it.
"When I was arrested,"
O'Halloran recalled,
"this copper said, 'You're guilty and that's it.' I told him, 'You've got it wrong.' Then he slapped me across the face."
As far as the police were concerned, they had their man. And then Langford entirely changed his story, claiming he was in fear of the police's brutality, and put the blame on Martin O'Halloran, his friend with the low IQ and bad memory. Presenting himself as O'Halloran's lapdog, Langford said he met Tommy in Birmingham on the night of the murder. Raymond Connors, manager of the Ringway Club on Bromsgrove Street, recalled seeing Pegleg and Gypsy Dave along with a woman believed to be Patricia Reardon. They then went to the Rendezvous Cafe and was spotted by a bus conductor who recalled the man with the artificial leg. That night, between 9 p.m. and 10 p.m, the barman at the Crown on the corner of Station Street and Hill Street recalled seeing Tommy, Patricia, Langford and O'Halloran sitting in the back lounge drinking together. The midsection around the murder was sketchy in Langford's retelling, and yet backed up by other witnesses. What happened next was described as a heart-wrenching picture of betrayal. In the early hours of Friday the 6th of June, after the body was hidden and the car had been dumped, Martin O'Halloran's sister, Mary, said they both arrived at a house in Hatfield, and she was shocked at the state of them.
Martin's clothes were stained with blood and there were grass marks on his knees.
He told her he'd been in a fight, so she washed his clothes and she scrubbed his shoes with a nail brush. In her statement, Mary recalled that O'Halloran had said there'd been an argument.
Martin said, "I hit him. He went down and he didn't get up. Arthur said to me, I went to see if the bloke was dead."
But he wasn't. Not yet. Keen to make it look good,
Martin hit and kicked him again.
and then they emptied Tommy's pockets. Some details in her statement make no sense, as she claimed,
They put him in a car and drove him to his flat.
which Arthur knew, recalling,
"I knew where he lived and I liked his apartment."
but for no known reason except that Tony was in.
Arthur said they went back to the bridleway and put him in a safe place.
They covered the body in bracken, drove the car to Merseyside, stripped it and fled. When asked by the judge why Mary was testifying against her own brother, Martin O'Halloran said it was because she was in love with Arthur Langford, and O'Halloran had taken him away from her. As for Patricia Reardon, O'Halloran's girlfriend, even though in the first of 6 statements, she said that she'd been with both men in London, his alibi was shattered when she stated he was supposed to meet her that night, but he didn't turn up, and then he threatened to hurt her if she didn't corroborate his lies. According to the statements of his best friend, his girlfriend and his sister, Martin O'Halloran, the Irish drifter with the low IQ and the bad memory, had targeted Tommy Walker, attacked him, and ordered Arthur Langford, his patsy, to help him get rid of the body. He then ordered Alan Smith to claim they'd hitchhiked to London together, providing him with a weak alibi and forcing Mary and Patricia to lie. But why? if he'd planned to rob a supposedly wealthy homosexual who was nicknamed Moneybags and carried rolls of notes. Why did O'Halloran not attack Tommy in one of the notorious public toilets where he was seen cottaging, where witnesses would be few and the police would fail to investigate? Questioned over many days and weeks, O'Halloran broke down, being interrogated by the police. So had the police finally uncovered the truth? Or was an illiterate drifter with a low IQ and a bad memory just confused by all of the statements? On the 3rd of March 1976 at Birmingham Crown Court, Martin O'Halloran and his ex-best friend Arthur Langford pleaded not guilty to murder. Edwin Jarrett, QC for the prosecution, pulled apart their alibis, stating,
Both men have lied their way out of trouble,
with Alan Smith being charged with perjury for providing a false statement. With a wealth of witnesses condemning them, 80 pieces of evidence against them, Tommy having stated before his death that he'd met an Irishman, and with O'Halloran portrayed as a drunk with a foul temper, and Langford as his terrified lapdog, the jury took just 3 hours of deliberation to come to a conclusion. On the 26th of March 1976, Martin O'Halloran was found guilty of murder and given a life sentence, with the judge describing him as a very dangerous man. Albert Langford was also found guilty, but of the lesser charge of manslaughter, and was sentenced to just 4 years in prison. Summing up, the judge said to Langford,
I accept on the evidence I have heard that you were the weaker element. You were dominated by O'Halloran. You were his lapdog, tagging along, willing to join in anything he was doing. I think one of the few things you said that was true was that you didn't want this to happen to Tommy Walker.
Both men were convicted, but how safe were these convictions? After the convictions, Langford sent O'Halloran a series of letters, even though he was illiterate. One read, Martin, as you know, I did the killing on my own. Every day, I feel a little more sad knowing that you're walking around convicted of a crime you did not do. And although he also sent a confession to O'Halloran's lawyers, as it conflicted with the trial's conclusion, it was dismissed. In 1995, he begged for a fresh investigation, but the prison's minister, Anne Widdicombe, rejected this. By then he had served his 8-year minimum tariff, but still pleading his innocence, after 2 strokes and a heart attack had left him partially sighted and partially paralysed. O'Halloran went on to serve a full 28 years. In 1996, Langford died, taking the truth with him. But Maggie, his daughter, later verified that the letters were real and stated that her dad
was adamant he'd done it. He wouldn't say that all this time if it wasn't true.
And she stated that her father went to his grave, protesting O'Halloran's innocence. In June 1999, the BBC's Rough Justice programme found a witness who admitted that they'd lied under police pressure. One lied in court. Several retracted their statements, including Patricia Reardon, who said that O'Halloran was in London at the time of the murder. And questioning Mary, O'Halloran's sister, she stated that the bloody clothes she washed actually belonged to Langford, not O'Halloran, and being illiterate, that she had no idea what she was signing when the police wrote up her statements. In 2003, Martin O'Halloran was released from prison, being nearly blind and disabled. For 12 years, his appeals was rejected. So in 2015, he submitted himself to the Utah test, the most accurate polygraph test, and he passed. And even if this system is flawed, ask yourself this. Given that he was illiterate, had a low IQ and a bad memory, which Langford abused to get off a murder charge, could he have come up with a plan to use himself as a gay honey trap? Would he have known to wipe Tommy's car clean of fingerprints, strip it of any documentation, destroy his license plates, the carpet, the ashtray, and anything which would have forensically linked to him? Or was this just a coincidence that it fitted the police's narrative?